Well, one of the things that the studies have shown that when a person is video gaming, or they're multitasking, or they're computer gaming, and they're blowing up people, or they're breaking through walls, or they're shooting people, or they're accomplishing a certain level, that the pleasure centers in the brain become stimulated. In other words, there's a gigantic release of dopamine in the brain. And that burst of a dopamine stimulates the pleasure centers, and that rush of chemistry begins to wake the brain and body up. And so the person then over time begins to become looking forward to that feeling. But what happens in the brain is, as you keep stimulating the dopamine centers, the cells begin to become desensitized, so it requires more dopamine to turn them on again. So the pleasure centers start beginning to recalibrate to a higher level. And so every time they play, you have to play a little longer. You have to change the game to get the same rush. Now, when that happens, then children then, in the absence of that stimulation, can't experience pleasure from anything. So you say to the child, hey, take your dog for a walk, or hey, let's go watch the sunset, or why don't you go visit your grandmother, an elder, and they're going to say, how boring, because that's not going to turn their brain on to get that rush. Now, when they get into school, and learning should be a reward in and of itself, and there's not that kind of stimulation, then their brain shuts off. And so the only way they can wake their brain up is to act out, to get in trouble, to release that adrenaline, just for the brain and body to momentarily become awake. And that rush of adrenaline actually decreases attention over time. And now we have a culture that's pleasure-seeking, completely dependent on the emotional rush. And when they get in situations in their life 20 years from now that requires them to focus and to look at the pain or their loss or their emptiness to change it, they're going to look for something outside of them to make that feeling go away. And so now we're talking about addictions, from alcohol to drugs to whatever it is that people use to regulate their emotions. And so we're creating a culture in time that, and I have nothing wrong with, but just like anything else, if a child is using technology because they're trying to regulate some emotion, or they're not doing their homework, or they're not doing their chores, and they're doing that to distract them from the things they have to do, then in time, they're going to wind up in trouble. You take a child and you have them complete their homework, finish everything, do all their chores, get everything organized, they're less prone to even want to play because they feel good about themselves, and that feeling overrides that other feeling. And so those receptor sites over time begin to become desensitized. It's like living with a spouse that always yells at you. They have to yell a little louder to get your attention. Well, the receptor sites on the cells are the same way. And when we become pleasure-seeking, in the absence of that stimulation, we can't find pleasure from anything.
So what are some of the things that parents can do with their kids to stimulate them, or to have them do something else than gaming and computer?
Well, there's a few things. Number one thing, I have 3 children, and every one of my kids do something in nature. That's the rule. My oldest son is a big wave surfer. He lives in California. He surfs. My daughter's a rock climber. My other son is a sailor. And they spend time in nature, and they respect nature. They respect currents and the waves and the wind. They respect the sun and the temperatures. They love getting out in nature and experiencing the vastness and the beauty of it. And so getting out in nature causes us to go from a narrow focus of computer technology to an open focus. And the brain literally recalibrates itself in terms of brainwave patterns when we go into open focus. Next, with parents, we used to do a 5-second rule. That means that if your child is playing with a technology or a game and you say, excuse me, Lilu, dinner's ready, and then you count backwards from 5, or you ask them a question, you count backwards from 5, if they can't stop the game and turn and address you, then they're addicted. And that's when the game ends. So to be able to have a child break from the game is also an important factor. And there's been research studies that show they were paying children to stop the video game every time they rang a bell, and none of them could stop it. The other thing, of course, is don't make video gaming something that you do first. Make it something that you do after you complete all of the tasks that create self-esteem. Now, once you develop enough things that create a sense of esteem or a sense of self, then they're less prone to use it because they're trying to fill in that emptiness or that lack that they can't find.
Because there must be an emotion or something natural that could compensate such an external technology as such an addiction, no?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And this, by the way, is really changing our youth. It's unfortunate, but it's changing our youth because, children are amazing with technology. You know, my children can get on any phone, any computer, and navigate way better than most adults. The problem is that they still have other skills that they have to develop: eye contact, communication, social skills, manners, compassion, completing cycles of action. And so if your child's identity is completely locked up in Facebook or technology or Twitter or texting, and they don't have a rounded out personality, they're more prone to really alter themselves and develop an identity that later on in their life is going to be completely dependent on regulating their emotions for pleasure.
It feels like you're having meals with them and talking and really sharing our own feelings and be vulnerable and authentic ourselves and having real conversation and getting to the bottom of it and talking emotion and just real things is so essential, and even more so than a must. It's up to us, really. Instead of blaming the kids, we have to be the ones to open up, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, listen, you can't be an adult and say, hey, don't video game or don't text or clean your room, and you have a messy room or you're addicted to your own computer games. That doesn't work that way. I mean, there's been research in the United States that shows that families just who eat dinner together, those children are way less prone to use drugs later on in their life because you're asking important questions, you're sharing ideas, you're bonding, you're removing layers or facades of protection that really keep the core issues from being addressed. And so, community is, children have mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are empathy neurons. Empathy neurons they model behavior. And so your child is going to be more prone to act like you and react like you because those mirror neurons are going to model your behavior. So I always say the fastest path to enlightenment is parenting, because you got to be the living example of everything you want your kids to be.
So your book is definitely for everybody, parents, non-parents.
Oh, absolutely.
It's time to read Joe's book, and the latest one is another bestseller. My God, it's called "Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself: How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One." Just to complete this conversation, can you tell us few misunderstandings that we really have to get now at this time?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones that we have to look at has to do with the nature of reality. We think everything is solid and everything is fixed and everything is particles and molecules, and that's not how reality is at all. The atom is 99.99999% nothing. It's energy, it's empty space. But our observation matters in collapsing, the waves of possibility into reality. And so if we live our life from the same level of mind, we're so powerful as the quantum observer in our life that we keep everything the same. And so creating a new level of mind and observing reality from that mind and beginning to make an effort to open our hearts and to be vulnerable and to be willing to let down the survival emotions that protect us from the unknown. It gives us permission to experience the unknown. So reality is not static, it's not solid. We are participants in the dream, and when we change our mind, the dream changes.